just as a reminder of what we discussed last week, if you weren't here, this is exactly what we discussed. So here are the biggest UK news stories for the past week, from the 19th to the 26th of November 2025. So the autumn budget has got people riled up a little bit. Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced sweeping tax rises worth 26 billion annually, froze income tax and national insurance thresholds until 2031, and scrapped the two-child benefit cap. The package aims to cut child poverty and stabilise public finances. That was the topic. It was about the budget and the fact that from next year, the two-child benefit cap that is in place at this moment in time will be lifted. The very first thing that I did to check into this, so I went on to AI and I asked AI about a timeline of the child poverty between the years 2000, and 2025. And this is the information it came up with. So if you think about our politics in 2000, Labour were in government and they remained, I think it was 2010 when the Conservatives came in. So in 2000 to 2005, according to AI, 30%. So in 2000, 30% of children were under the child poverty rate. So 30% of children were experiencing child poverty. And Labour extended the tax credit, Sure Start, and the child benefits at that point. And over the 5 years that was in place, poverty fell by 500,000 children. So a good measure. It was implemented, it came in, and it helped. It helped 500,000 children. In 2010, we go for it reduced it to 27%. So in 2010, when it was 27%, the Conservatives were in power and they introduced austerity policies and they introduced the benefit cap. So families with high rents capped and poverty reduction was stalled. That was the impact of that 2010. And 2010, it was 27%, and by 2013, it had increased to 28%. So in 2015, it had gone up again, 29%, and that was due to welfare cuts, benefit freezes, and the introduction of the two-child limit. So we had the benefit cap come in 2013, and then the two-child limit that they've now decided that they're going to scrap came in 2017. And that's when poverty rose to 30%. So it was back at the levels that it had been when Labour in 2000 had decided to introduce the tax credit, Sure Start, and the child benefits. So it was back up to 30% by 2017. So that was welfare cuts, benefit freeze, introduction of the two-child limit, and larger families were excluded from support because of the two-child limit. So if you had two children and you had another one, you weren't given any support for that child. And poverty began to rise even more when that came in. In 2018, it sat at 30% to 2020, and 4.2 million children at that point were in child poverty. And the two-child limit was fully in effect by that point because it had come in, I think it was April the year before. And deep poverty increased, especially among single parents. I mean, with the benefit cap, if you're a single parent, it was difficult anyway. But with the two-child policy, if you're a single parent, having another child, really huge effect. In 2025, we're now at 31%. So 1% higher than when we began in 2000. And now there are 1.6 million children affected by the two-child limit, the benefit cap, and it still constrains households. So we're at record highs. Scotland reduced poverty via child payment, but this isn't Scotland, this is England. So the two-child limit prevents families from claiming universal credit, child tax credit for a third or subsequent child. This is the thing that they're taking off now. It directly affected 1.6 million children by 2025. It increased the depth of poverty. Families reported choosing between food, clothing, and bills. I think we've heard that quite a lot. Disproportionately impacted larger families, ethnic minority households, and single parents. And it's estimated that scrapping it could lift 350,000 children out of poverty and reduce hardship for another 800,000. So that's a big, we're not going to take anything away from the government by lifting that cap, that two-child limit cap. It will help. So that's a good thing. The benefit cap was introduced 2013. It limited total household benefits to 26,000 a year. It hit families with high housing costs the hardest, especially in London. 2/3 of capped households were single parent families, half with a child under 5. It constrained gains from other welfare policies, meaning even families eligible for support couldn't receive full entitlements. UNICEF analysis found UK child poverty rose 34% since 2013, with deep poverty up 67%. So AI did a comparison for us. The scope, the benefit cap applied broadly to households with high benefit claims, while the two-child limit specifically targeted family size. The benefit cap 2013 coincided with austerity, halting earlier progress. The two-child limit in 2017 deepened poverty during the late 2010s. Impact: both policies disproportionately affected children, but the two-child limit had a direct numerical effect on over 1.5 million children, while the benefit cap indirectly constrained support for many households. Regional variation, well, we can look at Scotland, but I'm trying at the moment just to stay focused on the UK. Let me know if you want me to expand, and I mean, we can expand and contrast between the regional variations. So the takeaway: child poverty in the UK fell in the early 2000s, but rose sharply after 2013 benefit cap. The benefit cap and two-child limit were central drivers of this reversal, pushing millions of children into poverty. Their removal announced, it's interesting because AI has said their removal. We'll get to that. Their removal, announced for 2026, is projected to lift hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty, but without reform of the benefit cap, gains will remain limited. So that's what we're going to get into. Now, we've had quite a few voices speaking out about this. This is the website for End Child Poverty. You can find it endchildpoverty.org. And I'm just going to show you the media release from their CEO, the chair of the End Child Poverty Coalition. So this is their response to the government's announcement today about the two-child limit being scrapped. We commend the Chancellor on her decision to scrap the two-child limit, which will lift hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty. This provides real hope for families across the country. More children will grow up with the security, opportunity, and support they deserve. This change will help lift futures, giving more children the chance to dream bigger, learn without limits, and grow up knowing they are valued. Now, if you watched last week, and if you've watched me in the past, my ethos about moving forward with our health and well-being is teaching people how to recognize the importance of their health and well-being later in life, but feeling that I shouldn't have to do that, because if we had health and well-being measures in place for children at the start of life, lots of people would have better understanding of how to take care of themselves. So if we can prevent adults growing up with stress, trauma, and things that really affect them, then if we can do that from childhood, if we can teach children that they have a way of looking after their own health and well-being, then it's a great start to life. When it comes to child poverty, that isn't a great start to life. That's immediately plunging children into a space of need. There's lack, and it's a continuum. It's something that they will learn very, very early on. And if you think about the amount of children we've already looked that are in child poverty at the moment, imagine the health and well-being impacts for them as they grow into adulthood. It's very concerning. So that was from Joseph Howes. That's the chair of the End Child Poverty Coalition. And he seems quite chuffed with the change. So I'm going to take you now to Action for Children. This is how poverty affects children in an educational setting. Children living in poverty may do less well at school, have fewer job prospects, or feel fatigued and tired when learning. Mental health. Children living in poverty may worry about their parents, be scared about their future, or feel left out and embarrassed compared to others. All things that will impact their health and well-being later on. Family life. Families living in poverty may be unable to afford holidays and days out, not have enough food, or live in overcrowded homes. And school and friends. Children living in poverty may be unable to have friends over, struggle to afford the correct school uniform, or miss out on school trips. And they're just 4 aspects of how child poverty can affect children. We're going to stay with the same website. This is Action for Children. And they have also addressed what are the 2-child limit and benefit cap, and did they increase child poverty? So we've covered it a little, but I think it's really important that we cover it more thoroughly. So the two-child limit prevents parents from claiming universal credit payments for their third or any later child. It applies to children born after April 2017. The Chancellor, George Osborne, introduced the limit as part of the former government's drive to cut spending. It was originally sold to discourage parents already receiving benefits from having more children. So it was a deterrent. However, data shows that the limit has significantly increased the number of children in the UK living in poverty. 1 in 3 children are affected. In some of the poorest areas of the country, 1 in 3 children. Families affected have been left at least £3,514 a year worse off by the two-child limit. And to put that into real money, that's about £67 a week that people who have got 3 children, it's £67 a week that they cannot claim. They will be able to claim that from next year, but they haven't been able to claim that since 2017. And I can guarantee when it's lifted, there won't be back pay. But £67 a week to a single parent family is huge. That's a lot of money. And when you're counting every penny, and when we read that people are having to choose between heating and eating, £67 a week could really save a family and lift them, even so slightly, but lift them, lift their spirits, lift their energy. £67 a week, it's a lot. So what is the benefit cap? The benefit cap places a limit on the total amount of benefits a family can receive, no matter how big the family is or the cost of housing in their area. It mainly affects families with children and mostly single parents with very young children. Families affected by the benefit cap are more likely to be living in deeper poverty. And then we have the Scottish Government unveiled new plans to end the impact of the two-child benefit cap. So from Monday, the 2nd of March, the government will introduce a two-child limit payment. This will allow affected families in Scotland to receive payments and aim to reduce poverties. So that was Scotland, that's not the UK. So how has the cap increased child poverty? The two-child benefit cap is now affecting 1.6 million households across the UK, with 1 in 9 children affected. At the same time, the benefit cap pushes families deeper into hardship and makes it harder to escape poverty. A lot of the conversation around the two-child limit focuses on this simplistic idea that people should not have more children than they can afford. This is both cruel and in many cases irrelevant. I agree. Okay. So how removing the two-child limit and benefit cap will help families? This is how it will help families. 1.6 million children are affected by the two-child limit. 1 in 9 children. The government has announced that the two-child limit will be scrapped in full as part of its upcoming child poverty strategy. This will lift 350,000 children out of poverty overnight and keep 500,000 free from poverty by the end of the decade. Nearly half, 49% of children living in poverty are in families with more than 2 children. We have been campaigning for the Labour government to remove the two-child limit and benefit cap as part of our Paying the Price campaign. Scrapping the two-child limit will mean fewer children going into cold homes without enough food to eat, warm clothes to wear, or a bed to sleep in. And it asks if you can help. If you can help, please go to Action for Children. If anything like that has touched you, the Paying the Price campaign, I'll show you that in a second. But this is where I don't feel our government is doing enough. The bottom line is, if a single parent or if a family gets £67 extra on their benefits because the 2-child limit has been lifted, and say they have an extra child, they've got a third child, and they're working. However, with the circumstances, they're claiming universal credit in order to top up and help with their situation if they're experiencing poverty. Because it's not just people that aren't working that are experiencing poverty. So if you work and you claim universal credit and you have a third child and you gain £67 in your overall benefits, universal credit will adjust any benefit you receive from them to account for that £67. I hope that's clear. If families are on universal credit and they gain an extra £67 after the 2-child cap is lifted, universal credit will automatically, they'll have to let universal credit know that they have £67 a week extra coming in, and that will be offset and adjusted by universal credit. So those families will be no better off. When I understood that, I do understand that there will be a lot of children that are lifted out of poverty, and it will be those that are not on universal credit, the families that are not on universal credit, and that will have a huge impact for them. And I'm really happy for that. But those families that are on universal credit, it's not going to change their circumstance at all. And that bears further research, in my estimation. Because if we're looking at the start of a child's life and their health and well-being and lifting them on an energetic level to not experience the circumstances that surround poverty, then we need to do more. The government needs to do more. And that comes on to the next part that I want to share with you. That was Action for Children. Please do go and support them if you feel able. The work that they're doing is really extensive, and they're getting there, they're chipping away. And it was Action for Children that commissioned this report. So the options to reduce child poverty. And these are policy measures included in the modelling. This is what Action for Children, Paying the Price report, have indicated would be for the government to implement, for the government to put in place. So, scrapping the 2-child limit on benefits, which the government have done. So this is the benefit adequacy for families with children. Removing the overall benefit cap and introducing a benefits escalator for the child-related parts of universal credit. So that's the benefit adequacy for children, for families with children. Benefits take-up, improving the take-up of benefits through a targeted campaign aimed at low-income households. This is something that they say needs to be part of policy. So we're talking at government level. Childcare support, increasing universal credit childcare support from 85% of costs to 100%. Work incentives in the social security system, reducing the universal credit taper rate from 55 to 50%. Introducing a second earner's work allowance in universal credit of £400 per month. And paying conditions, increasing the minimum wage to match the real living wage. Increasing the state of statutory sick pay to the real living wage and making it available from day one of sickness. Housing, building more social housing, gradually ramping up to 90,000 extra homes a year. And child maintenance, introducing universal collect and pay of child maintenance and the removal of fees in the child maintenance service. So all of those are policy measures that Action for Children are telling the government is needed in order to lift children out of poverty. I think it's by 2030, so in 5 years. So after they said about the measures, they came up with scenarios as part of their modelling. So I'm not going to go through all the scenarios, but scenario 1 is if they just scrap the benefit cap and the 2-child limit, if they were removed. Scenario 2 is removing the 2-child limit and the benefit cap, plus the benefits escalator and childcare support that we've already mentioned up on the policies. Scenario 4 is everything above, plus employment and support incentives mentioned in the policies. Scenario 5 is everything above, plus the labour markets and the housing reforms. So that effectively is bringing in 8 of the policy changes that they would like to see. Scenario 6, Scenario 7 and Scenario 8 are taking out some of the policies above and just working with a few. I mean, Scenario 8 is if they didn't have any of the other policies in place and they just included the employment support, the universal credit taper rate reduction, and a second earner's work allowance. So if everything else was still in place, and that was the only policy that was brought in. And you can see these are the impacts that those policies would have. So I'll take you through them. But you can see the lowest. This is the baseline poverty, child poverty rate in 2025 with no reforms is going to remain and probably increase over 30%. Okay. This is an aim. The target reduction is to reduce child poverty by 25% by 2030. Now, I told you about the scenarios and I've told you about the policies that have been recommended to government. So far, government have chosen one policy, and that is taking off the 2-child cap. If you remember, policy 5 was the one that included everything in front of it and included the real living wage, social housing, child maintenance service measures. And that is the pink line. So the pink line, if we did that in 2025, the pink line, if government incorporated all the policy changes that have been recommended, we wouldn't still have reduced child poverty to 25% until 2030. 2030 is their aim. And you can see that if all the policies were put in place by government, child poverty would be reduced less than 20% to less than 20%. If they just go with removing the 2-child limit and the benefit cap. So remember, they've only done the 2-child limit. If they did just those two, it would still be up at about 26% by 2030. So that's not enough. I mean, higher than that is if they ignored all the policies and just put those employment measures in place, it would be higher. You're looking probably about 29% still. So the next one doesn't bring us under either. So that's the 2% the escalator policy. The third one, where it was everything before and increase the benefit take up. So encourage families to take benefits that they're entitled to. A lot of families don't claim benefits that they're entitled to. So if we did that, then it would, by 2030, decrease below the 25% that's aimed at. But 5 is where we need to be. 5 would reduce it to less than 20%. So just implementing the 2-child cap removal is not going to make as much difference as we would hope. It just isn't. Even if they took the benefit cap off, you can see from this, it's still not going to be enough to raise children out of poverty. It's just not enough. And this report is really detailed, and it goes into everything that the government needs to do to meet by 2030, some sort of change for our start of life. And this is probably why they're not implementing everything. So the costs of it to the government is where the issues are. It costs them very little. And we're talking policy cost in billions. But when you're at government, you're working with billions all the time in the budgets. So it hasn't cost them as much as this, because they've only taken off the 2-child limit. Like the benefit cap, if they took that off as well, it would still cost them less than any of the rest. But the cost when it comes to the one that we suggest and Action for Children suggest, if they put all of the policies in place, you're getting up to about 24 billion. And this is the annual policy costs by 2030 under each scenario in billions. And it's worked off of 2025 prices because it's not offset for inflation and things like that. So, yeah. So reduction in child poverty by 2030. Effectively, 5 with labour market and housing reforms. The reduction in poverty for children would be 1.5 million children better off. So the percentage reduction in child poverty would be 36%. 36%. The fiscal cost by 2030 is going to be 24.3 billion. So the cost of taking one child out of poverty, if all of those policies were implemented, would be 16,200 per child. So that is probably a good explanation of why the government hasn't implemented as many of the policies that were recommended as necessary in order to lift children out of poverty. So while it's great that some will be lifted, it is not great that a lot of children are going to remain in poverty.